The apprentice of Goku, the main character of Dragon Ball, is known as Uub, the reincarnation of Majin Buu, who became a human after Goku asked King Yama to bring him back as a better person. Eventually, at the very end of Dragon Ball Z, Goku encountered Uub in the World Martial Arts Tournament, and then went on to take him under his wing, flying off with Uub into the distance to train him to become the future protector of the Earth. However, with Dragon Ball GT and now Dragon Ball Super, many people have argued that perhaps Uub was not used to his full potential. Well, today we're going to be talking about why Uub has been wasted potential in the Dragon Ball franchise. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and before we start, I want to tell you about my new channel, Laughingstock Cinema. Laughingstock Cinema is a channel where I will be analyzing movies and live-action TV shows in theory videos, top lists, and more. So if you like movies and shows as much as I do and you want to hear my thoughts on them, check out Laughingstock Cinema. A link to the channel will be in the description and the end screen of this video. Alright guys, so today we're breaking down why we believe that Uub may have been wasted potential in the Dragon Ball franchise thus far, and perhaps ways that he can be utilized better in the future. And joining me today is someone who has talked much about Uub on his own channel in the past, and his name is...
Alrighty guys, it is Kwame here today, also known as Detective Q, and recently I did a video on how a Goku and Uub story could work in Dragon Ball Super, and made some comparisons to Dragon Ball GT, so I'm excited to be on this topic today.
Yeah, so Uub, as we saw with the Dragon Ball Z series, or the original run of the Dragon Ball manga, doesn't really appear very much. You know, in the manga, he's only there for like a chapter or two, and in the anime, they do expand upon his fight with Goku and kind of Goku's general thoughts about Uub. However, that's pretty much all we really get to see of him, and his ending is kind of like a cliffhanger of sorts because it showcases Goku going off on further adventures with his new disciple, I suppose, and something we haven't really seen in the Dragon Ball franchise up until that point, with Goku actually taking a student. However, that's all we really came to see in Dragon Ball Z. Now, Kwame, do you think that, as far as the Dragon Ball Z portion of Uub's existence, that perhaps it should have been a little bit longer, more stretched out, you know, even barring in mind things that might have been happening with Toriyama at the time he wrote that manga chapter, and how do you think they could have perhaps done that?
Well, I think that's a great question because I think you have to look at what the writer's intent was. If the intent was to have Uub for a short period of time to potentially hype up another series, Dragon Ball GT, or to also just end it off with a cliffhanger like you said, then it makes sense. And obviously, Dragon Ball Z ended in a way where the story could easily pick up again if Toriyama or the Toei staff wanted to do so, which is why Dragon Ball GT is a continuation of Z, regardless of whether or not you like the series. So in terms of setting up a storyline that could be used later for the future, I think that was successful. However, I do think one of the biggest problems with Uub, Mike, is that a lot of Dragon Ball fans, including myself, kind of felt like we went through a direction of the series where we have characters like Gohan, Goten, Trunks, Vegeta, all these people that we've gotten so accustomed to, Bulma, all the rest of them. And Piccolo, I can't forget to mention him. And we got to a point where these are the characters that we really loved and enjoyed in the series. So when Goku kind of just says, okay, I want to train this random powerful kid and I'm gonna be leaving you guys, or at least not being around you guys as much so that he can maximize his power, it kind of seems like this is kind of a weird way to end the story. So we just leave with this random kid and then the future is history. And I think that that's one of the problems that I think a lot of people had with that. And where I think Dragon Ball could have uplifted the storyline would have been Dragon Ball GT, but I'm sure, you know, this is a whole other conversation we have to dive into now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually did rewatch GT recently just to kind of get a fresher perspective on it as time has gone along. And Uub really doesn't amount to much in that show when you think about it. You know, we first see the series start off with Goku and he training in a special room similar to the hyperbolic time chamber that Dende had constructed for the two of them. And basically we see that he's able to kind of match base Goku and go really far against him. But then we see that Goku has like Super Saiyan 1, 2, and 3 on top of that. And, you know, by the time Uub actually comes back into the story, because he's basically left on Earth when Goku, Pan, and Trunks go off on their misadventures throughout the galaxy, by the time he shows back up once Baby has basically taken over the Earth, he's kind of irrelevant. Like, he doesn't really do much against Baby until Majin Buu comes in and basically sacrifices himself and then kind of fuses with Uub's being to become Majoob or Super Uub or whatever you want to call him. And even then, like, despite the fact that he seems to be doing better than Super Saiyan 3 Goku, he still loses to Baby, and they do make it seem like he lost on purpose because he does expand inside Baby and kind of hold him off a little bit. You know, that's pretty much the biggest achievement he has in the entire GT series that I can think of, and he gets pretty much owned in every arc after that. So what do you think about Uub's involvement in GT? Do you think that there's ways they could have done it better? Do you think maybe he should have gone with Goku on the mission, you know, to gather the Black Star balls? What do you kind of think they really should have done with Uub?
Well, the first thing I would say to that, Mike, is that when you look at Dragon Ball GT, I don't really think of it as an underutilization of Uub, more so being an underutilization of most characters in the franchise, because when you look at the fact that it's pretty much Dragon Ball Goku's time, the first arc was featured about Goku, Pan, and Trunks, then the next arc was featured around Goku, Baby, and Vegeta, and then after that it's like the Super 17 arc was about 17, Goku, a little bit of 18, and then the Shadow Dragon arc was Goku and Vegeta again. So looking at all of what Dragon Ball GT has done, I think the entire show had an underutilization problem of characters in general, and Uub just happened to fall under that plot. Now, in terms of ways that I think they could have used Uub better, I definitely think that putting Uub on that trip with Goku to go to outer space would have been a great comparison, because first of all, since Goku's a kid again, even though I didn't agree with that move for the show to do that, but if you're gonna make Goku a kid again, it would be an interesting contrast to see Uub fighting alongside Goku. So now you have a situation where Goku's a kid, but now he's fighting with his apprentice who's now older than him. And if you want to take out Pan and then possibly replace it with Trunks, because you kind of need Trunks to be like the brain of the group, now you have a situation in which you have three guys going into outer space who are much more defensive. You could make the plot much more demanding, and although you could add silly gag humor here or there, I definitely think Uub being as part of the whole space trip would have been interesting. And when we go back to the battle of Baby on the Tuffle Planet remake, I think the situation would have been much more interesting there, Mike, because instead of Uub just being on planet Earth, now Uub would have been with Goku the entire time, and you could have possibly have had another character that would have been possessed that could have had like a 2-on-2 against Goku, and I think that would have made the series much more enriching to have Uub involved earlier instead of just randomly showing up, fusing with Buu and doing nothing.
Yeah, and even then, like, a lot of the things that happen in GT make everyone pretty much seem weak compared to Goku, because base Goku in GT is already overpowered as it is, and he basically shows up in the Baby Saga and, like, can beat everyone in his base except for, like, Baby, you know? And even then, like, somehow Vegeta, I guess, got, like, a 400 times increase, and so did Uub and everyone else, so that they could actually fight against Super Saiyan 3 level Goku characters, but it didn't really amount to much, you know? And that's kind of the thing of GT in general, like one of the themes, you know, that there's so much potential that there was in that show to create something amazing, and there's so many different ideas that they introduced that could have been amazing, but eventually it all basically boiled down to Goku, Pan, and sometimes Trunks actually mattering.
Right, and Vegeta.
Yeah, and I think I could speak for most people when I would say I'd be far more interested in seeing Uub and Gohan, Goten, somebody like that going on the mission with Goku instead of Pan.
Right, and I think if we were to like add this to Dragon Ball Super, Mike, I think when we take this direction to the way Super is, I do think with the time gap that is left, I don't see a lot of room for them to do a lot with Uub in this current timeline. However, Mike, I do think that if Super were to ever go past this whole time gap before the ending of Z and go into the time gap of Goku and Uub training with each other before what was supposed to be Dragon Ball GT, I think that there is potential for that, and Dragon Ball Super could do a time skip, even though Toyotaro says that they're not really aiming to do so at this moment. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts here, Mike, on what would you think of a potential lineup of Goku and Uub having their own training story after what would be the ending of the Z time period?
Well, that would definitely be something I'd really be interested in seeing because, you know, it would be cool to kind of see how Goku would introduce the powers to Uub. Basically, this is what Ki is, this is how you control it, this is how you can move faster, how you could sense things, you know, kind of similar to how Piccolo was explaining to Gohan at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, how to follow fights without using your eyes, you know, use your senses. It would be really cool to see kind of Uub take on that sort of like Luke from Star Wars, kind of fish out of water, explaining everything to him and explaining it to the audience at the same time sort of mentality. Plus, a lot of people don't like Uub, as you mentioned, because people felt like it was kind of a waste for Goku to train him instead of his sons, and then we don't really even see him again in canon Dragon Ball, basically, or at least the current canon of Super. So when you think about that, I think it would be really helpful for Uub's character to show him training more, because it would be able to develop him to a great degree, because we could see him struggle, we could see what truly motivates him, and so that he can eventually, you know, after all this training, we could see Goku and Uub maybe fight the next threat, you know. Maybe Goku is training Uub for an upcoming tournament, you know, against other universes that are still alive after Dragon Ball Super or whatever. There's definitely ways that they could really incorporate it, because I think that would be really interesting if one of the reasons why Goku is taking Uub and training him is because maybe the next Tournament of Power is coming at that point, and they decide to wait a few years instead of waiting, you know, a few days or whatever this time, and so Goku needs someone as strong as possible, so why not the reincarnation of Majin Buu? Sounds pretty good to me.
Hey, right, and if I were to just add a quick note here, Mike, I think one other thing that I mentioned in my video is that when it comes to the other characters, because this is going to be another time skip, now you're kind of forced to age Goten and Trunks, and because of this, you're going to have older characters, you're going to have more characters, so there's going to be much more character interaction in general. The only question would be who would be your villain. But if there's one more thing I think would really enrich this whole Uub story is that instead of Goku teaching Uub to do everything, Uub could live in a world where he can kind of learn from everybody else. It's kind of like you're playing Xenoverse and you have like all these masters to teach you different techniques. Maybe Master Roshi can teach him some techniques here or there. Maybe, you know, obviously Uub could learn some things from Vegeta. So I really think that Uub can really be a character like Emerald from the Sonic series, where he can develop and learn so much from so many characters and really be ingrained into the general storyline.
Yeah, and it's very similar to the Kanzenban ending of Dragon Ball, in which we see that Goku gives Uub his Kinto Un, or his flying Nimbus cloud, so that he could kind of fly off, and Goku pictures Uub kind of like what he used to be as a kid in the beginning of Dragon Ball. I think it would be kind of interesting if they kind of took that concept full circle and we saw Uub go on his own training adventure, kind of like Goku did after the 21st tournament. There's a lot of different directions they could take the Uub character in, especially if they decide to go past the end of Z.
And I think if there's one final question I wanted to add to this here, Mike from Laughingstock Media, it would be, how do you think this would all affect Uub's character if Majin Buu is around? I think that's something that's a lot of food for talk.
I'm not really sure, however, I do think it would be really interesting to see their interactions, and perhaps once Uub actually finds out that this Buu is who he used to be, or it used to be somewhat of a part of his existence, it could be a really interesting kind of scene and moment for Uub as a character, especially if maybe they go in the direction of Goku not telling Uub who he really used to be. Maybe Uub finds out about Buu and about what kind of horrible things he did, all these people he killed, the very gods themselves, and then he finds out that that is who he used to be before he was reincarnated. I think that could certainly bring up a lot of drama. And maybe you could even have like a little storyline where Uub kind of turns to the dark side for a little period of time, and he has to be brought back by Goku, you know, to the light side. I think that'd be really cool.
Right, and this whole story would be just like Nam from Dragon Ball, where this person who comes from a poor village is now kind of bringing his way up, but this time he would actually be more involved in the story, and it would be good to see, you know, Mr. Satan enriching his village with money, or maybe some help with Bulma, and then who knows, maybe even Majin Buu will do a candy beam and just feed his entire village, you know, junk food, you know what I mean?
Very possible. But anyway, I think that we can come to the conclusion from this video that Uub in some ways kind of was wasted potential, especially if we consider Dragon Ball GT. However, he still has a lot of potential in the future to be used in much bigger ways.
And I would definitely say if you're a fan of Dragon Ball GT, you would know that Uub is just like everybody else. Just stall and buy time for Goku and Vegeta to do all the dirty work.
Pretty much. But let us know your own thoughts down below in the comments section about this topic, if you think Uub was wasted, and what ways you'd like to see him used in the future. Also, of course, check out Detective Q in the end card and down below in the description, and as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, Uub has such great potential gains, but he will never be able to strengthen himself to even 1% of my left bicep.